He thought he could erase me with a single click, but 2 minutes later, his entire $41 million empire turned to ash. And the best part, he didn't even know who pulled the trigger. They say revenge is a dish best served cold. I say it's best served at precisely 10:02 a.m. in a boardroom full of investors, while you're sipping coffee 3 states away. This is the story of how I legally, ethically, and irrevocably destroyed the man who tried to steal 5 years of my life, and I did it all without breaking a single law. My name is Harper Lane, and for 5 years, I was the invisible backbone of Redcrest Technologies, not the face on the company website, not the name in the press releases, but the one who actually built the infrastructure that kept $40 million worth of contracts running smoothly. I was 34, single by choice, and completely devoted to my work. Some might call that pathetic. I called it passionate. The morning everything changed started like any other. I arrived at the office at 6:30 a.m., 2 hours before most of the team, armed with my usual large black coffee and a head full of solutions to problems nobody else even knew existed yet. The server room hummed its familiar greeting as I passed, and I touched the door frame like a talisman, my daily ritual, my kingdom of cables and code. I'd spent the previous weekend architecting a new deployment pipeline that would cut our release time by 60%, not because anyone asked me to, but because inefficiency physically pained me. I was reviewing the final documentation when Richard Vaughn, our CEO, walked past my desk with someone I'd never seen before. "Harper," Richard said, his tone suggesting my name was an afterthought. "This is Ethan. He'll be joining us as VP of Engineering Innovation." Ethan Vaughn, 27 years old, fresh MBA from Wharton, and a smile that had never known the frustration of a production server crashing at 3 a.m. He extended his hand with the confidence of someone who'd never had to earn anything. "Harper Lane," Richard continued, suddenly remembering I existed. "She's one of our senior engineers. She'll help you get oriented with our systems." Senior engineer. After 5 years of building everything from scratch, I was reduced to senior engineer, but I smiled, shook Ethan's hand, and said all the right things. I'd learned long ago that in tech, being right was less important than being liked, and being female meant you had to be both while making it look effortless. The first red flag came during our initial meeting. Ethan sat in my office, the small one without windows that I'd claimed as my sanctuary, and asked me to walk him through our architecture. I spent 3 hours explaining every component, every integration, every clever workaround I'd implemented to keep our costs down while our performance soared. He took notes on his iPad, nodding thoughtfully, occasionally asking questions that revealed he understood maybe 20% of what I was saying. "This is impressive," he said finally, "but it seems overly complex. We should simplify." As if he'd been there during the 18-hour days when I'd migrated our entire infrastructure with zero downtime, as if he understood why each component existed, why each decision had been made. "I'd be happy to discuss optimization strategies," I replied carefully. "Once you're more familiar with our specific use cases." "I think I've got a good grasp," he interrupted. "I'll put together a presentation for the board. Show them our new direction." Our new direction? He'd been here 4 hours. 2 weeks later, I found out what our new direction meant. I was locked out of the architecture documentation repository. My admin access, the access I needed to do my actual job, had been revoked without explanation. When I messaged AT, they responded that it was per executive request, and to speak with my supervisor. My supervisor was now Ethan Vaughn. I walked to his office, the corner one with floor-to-ceiling windows, that had mysteriously become available after the previous VP's sudden departure, and found him presenting my pipeline design to 3 board members on a massive display. My code, my architecture diagrams, my innovation, but on every slide, in bold letters at the bottom, designed by Ethan Vaughn, VP of Engineering Innovation. "Harper," he called out when he saw me. "Perfect timing. Could you grab us some coffee? We're just going over the new system architecture I've developed." The board members didn't even look at me. I was invisible, a ghost in my own creation. I nodded, turned, and walked to the break room, but I didn't get coffee. Instead, I stood there, staring at the fancy espresso machine Richard had bought to impress investors, and felt something inside me shift. Not breaking would have been too loud, too noticeable. This was quieter, a decision crystallizing in the silence between heartbeats. They wanted to erase me. Fine, but they'd forgotten one crucial detail. I was the only one who truly understood how everything worked, and more importantly, I was the only one who knew how to make it stop working. I returned to the meeting with a tray of perfectly prepared coffees, smiled as I served them, and listened as Ethan butchered the explanation of my work. The board members nodded along, impressed by his confidence if not his competence, and I smiled like I'd never smiled before. Because I'd just realized something beautiful: they needed me to be invisible. It made their theft easier, cleaner. But invisibility, I was learning, could be a weapon too. The most dangerous person in any organization isn't the one making noise. It's the quiet one who knows where all the bodies are buried because she's the one who buried them. The systematic theft of my work accelerated over the next month like a cancer metastasizing through healthy tissue. Every Monday morning, I'd find another piece of my 5-year legacy rebranded with Ethan's name, the authentication system I'd built from scratch, Ethan's innovative security framework, the machine learning pipeline that predicted server failures before they happened, Avon Technologies' exclusive innovation. The morning I watched him present my work to ValorCap's preliminary assessment team was when the rage finally turned cold. I sat in the back of the conference room, officially there to provide technical support if needed, which meant I was supposed to be invisible furniture until Ethan stumbled over a technical question he couldn't answer. "The beauty of this system," Ethan said, gesturing at my architecture diagram with a laser pointer he wielded like a magic wand, "is how I've designed it to be both scalable and cost-effective. When I first joined Redcrest, the infrastructure was a mess, basic, outdated, barely functional. I bit the inside of my cheek hard enough to taste copper. Barely functional, I'd built a system that handled 3 million requests per second with 99.9% uptime. Through my innovative approach," he continued, "we've revolutionized our entire stack. Let me walk you through the elegant solution I've architected." He clicked to the next slide my code, my comments still visible in the corners where he'd been too lazy to crop properly. I recognized the function I'd written at 2 a.m. during a critical outage, the elegant recursive solution that had saved us from losing our biggest client. Now it had his name on it. One of the ValorCap partners raised her hand. "This distributed caching layer, how does it handle regional failovers?" Ethan's smile flickered for just a moment. "That's an excellent question. The failover protocol is sophisticated. Harper, would you mind elaborating on the technical specifics?" Of course, I was good enough to save him when he was drowning, but not good enough to receive any credit. I stood, walked to the front, and explained my system with the detached precision of a coroner describing a corpse. I watched their eyes light up with understanding, saw them scribbling notes, knew they were impressed, and I watched Ethan nod along as if he was graciously allowing his subordinate to handle the minor details. "Thank you, Harper," he said when I finished, his tone suggesting I'd just fixed the printer rather than explained the core innovation that made our company valuable. "As you can see, my team is well trained in implementing my vision." My team, my vision. I returned to my seat, my hands steady despite the volcano building in my chest. The meeting ended with handshakes and promises of follow-up. Richard clapped Ethan on the shoulder, beaming with paternal pride. "Excellent work, son. This is why I brought you in." Son, there it was, spoken aloud at last, the nepotism we all pretended not to see. Now casual confession in an empty conference room. They didn't even notice I was still there, gathering my laptop, invisible as always. "The full demo for the $41 million deal is in 6 weeks, Richard continued. "I want you front and center. This is your moment to shine." "Don't worry," Ethan replied. "I've got everything under control. The system is bulletproof." Bulletproof? He didn't even know what language it was primarily written in. That afternoon, I found an email in my inbox that made everything crystalline clear. It was from Richard, CC'd to the entire executive team but not the engineering staff. Someone had forgotten to remove me from an old distribution list, a tiny oversight that revealed everything. Team, as we approach the Valor Cap final presentation, I want to ensure we're putting our best foot forward. Ethan will be leading the technical demonstration with support from our junior staff. To avoid any confusion during the presentation, only essential personnel will have access to the demo environment. We need to project a clear chain of command and innovation leadership. Junior staff. After 5 years, I was junior staff. I read the email 3 times, each word a nail in the coffin of my loyalty. Then I noticed the attachment, a revised org chart for the investor presentation. Ethan's name sat at the top of the engineering hierarchy. Mine wasn't on it at all. They weren't just stealing my work, they were erasing my existence. I closed my laptop and walked to the server room. My server room. I ran my fingers along the racks I'd configured, the cables I'd organized, the systems I'd built from nothing. Every blinking light was a heartbeat I'd given this company. Every humming fan a breath I'd breathed into their dreams. "You okay, Harper?" I turned to find Marcus, one of the junior developers, looking concerned. "Fine," I said. "Just thinking about Ethan's presentation. Pretty impressive stuff. Guy's a genius." A genius. My work had made a genius out of a man who couldn't write a Hello World program without Stack Overflow. "Yeah," I agreed. "He's really something special." That night, I stayed late, not to fix problems or improve systems, but to document every single thing I'd built. Not for them, for me. Screenshots, code repositories, commit histories, design documents, all copied to my personal drive. Not to steal, but to prove what had always been mine. At 11:45 p.m., I sat alone in the dark office, lit only by the glow of my monitors. On one screen, 5 years of my commits. On another, Ethan's org chart with my name missing. They wanted to pretend I didn't exist. Fine. Let's see how well their stolen kingdom stands when the ghost stops holding it up. The art of war is not about destroying your enemy with brute force. It's about making them destroy themselves while you watch from a safe distance. I learned this not from Sun Tzu, but from 5 years of being a woman in tech, where direct confrontation meant being labeled difficult and silence meant being erased. So I chose a third option, malicious compliance wrapped in a smile. My preparation began with the kind of meticulous planning that had made me indispensable in the first place. Every night after the office emptied, I worked on my insurance policy. Not revenge, not yet just insurance. I spun up a parallel infrastructure on my personal AWS account, mirroring our entire production environment. Every configuration, every dependency, every intricate connection I'd crafted over the years, duplicated in a space only I could access. The beauty was in its legality. I wasn't stealing code, I'd written 90% of it myself, and my employment contract had a clause about maintaining personal development environments for continuous learning and improvement. Richard had even praised this clause during a company meeting, calling it the kind of self-driven excellence that makes Redcrest special. During the day, I became the perfect invisible employee. When Ethan stumbled over basic concepts, I was there with gentle corrections framed as suggestions. When the deployment pipeline he'd optimized crashed production at 3 a.m., I fixed it silently and let him take credit for the resolution. When he presented my database architecture as his own to potential partners, I sat quietly in the corner, taking notes like a dutiful secretary. "Harper, you're being so helpful lately," Ethan said one afternoon, standing over my desk with that practiced smile. "I really appreciate you embracing the new structure." "Of course," I replied, my own smile a masterpiece of false sincerity. "We're all on the same team." "Exactly, that's the spirit. Hey, I need you to document the entire authentication system. Make it really detailed, like explain it to a 5-year-old detailed, for the new hires." There were no new hires. He needed it because he still didn't understand how it worked, despite claiming he'd designed it. "I'll have it ready by tomorrow," I promised. I did create documentation, Two versions. Actually, one was the real documentation, stored safely in my personal repository. The other was what I gave Ethan, technically accurate, but filled with subtle dependencies he'd never notice, like how the system relied on specific environment variables that seemed redundant but were actually critical, or how certain functions had timeout parameters that appeared arbitrary but were precisely calibrated to our server specifications. Every piece of false documentation was a breadcrumb leading to a cliff he wouldn't see until he'd already stepped off it. The CTO, Sandra Kim, noticed something was off during an architecture review meeting. "Ethan, this authentication flow seems unnecessarily complex," she said. Frowning at his presentation, my work filtered through his understanding, which is to say, mangled beyond recognition. "It's sophisticated," he countered, using his favorite word for things he didn't understand. "Harper can verify she's been maintaining it." Sandra turned to me. For a moment, her eyes held a question. She'd been here since the beginning. She knew who really built these systems. "The complexity serves a purpose," I said carefully. "Each layer provides specific security benefits that protect our client data. Ethan's right, it is sophisticated." I watched Sandra's face. She knew I was lying, covering for him, but she also knew why. The CEO's son was untouchable, and anyone who challenged him would find themselves suddenly pursuing other opportunities. That night, I made my final preparations. I created a script that would archive our entire staging environment at exactly 10:02 a.m. on demo day. Not delete, that would be sabotage. Archive. Move it to a cold storage tier that would take hours to retrieve, assuming they even knew where to look. The script was triggered by the natural expiration of security tokens I'd implemented months ago. Tokens Ethan didn't even know existed. I also prepared my handoff documents, hundreds of pages of procedures, all technically correct, all useless without the context I'd never written down, like a recipe that lists ingredients but not proportions, or instructions that say, "turn left," without mentioning where. Working late again. Marcus stood in my doorway, laptop bag slung over his shoulder. "Just organizing some documentation," I said. "Want to make sure everything's perfect for the big demo." "Man, Ethan's lucky to have you. I don't know how he keeps track of all this stuff." "He's got a gift," I agreed, my fingers never stopping their typing. Marcus laughed. "Yeah, the gift of having you do all the actual work. We're not all blind, Harper." I looked up, surprised. He shrugged. "I've seen the commit logs. We all have. But what can we do? He's the CEO's kid." "It's fine," I said. "Really? Is it, though?" Marcus met my eyes. "You've built something incredible here. It's not right that he's taking credit." "The company's success is what matters," I replied, the lye ash in my mouth. Marcus shook his head. "Just don't let them completely erase you." "Okay." After he left, I sat in the empty office, surrounded by the servers humming their midnight song. Don't let them erase me. They already had. I was already a ghost. But ghosts, I was learning, could be powerful things. You can't fight what you can't see. You can't stop what you don't know is happening. I pulled up the ValorCap meeting invite on my calendar. 6 weeks away, $41 million on the line. Ethan's moment to shine with my light. I updated my LinkedIn profile that night, not obviously just small changes. Open to opportunities, a few new skill endorsements, subtle signals that I was movable. By 3 a.m., I had 12 recruiter messages. Silicon Valley's invisible network already knew what Redcrest refused to acknowledge: I was the real asset. I archived them all. I wasn't leaving for a better offer. I was leaving to watch an empire burn from exactly the distance required to avoid the smoke. The email arrived on a Tuesday morning. 3 weeks before the ValorCap demo, I read it twice, then once more, each word a perfectly placed dagger between my ribs. "Team, as we prepare for the most important presentation in Redcrest's history, we need to ensure a streamlined, professional presence. The demo team will consist of myself, Ethan as technical lead, Sandra as CTO, and Bradley from sales. All other personnel will continue their regular duties to maintain business continuity. Thank you for your understanding. Richard Vaughn. Not even the courtesy of a personal rejection. I wasn't being excluded. I was being erased from the narrative entirely. The system I'd built, the presentation I should be giving, the triumph that should have been mine, I wouldn't even be in the room. Sandra stopped by my desk an hour later, her face carefully neutral. Harper, about the demo team. It's fine, I said, not looking up from my screen. It's not fine. We both know. What we know doesn't matter. I finally met her eyes. Does it? She stood there for a long moment, probably wrestling with 20 years of corporate survival instincts. Finally, she sighed. For what it's worth, I tried. I told Richard we needed you there. And Ethan felt it would be confusing to have too many technical voices in the room. He wants to present a unified vision. His unified vision, my 5 years of 18-hour days, distilled into his PowerPoint slides. I understand, I said. Actually, this works out well. I've been meaning to take some time off. Sandra frowned. Time off now. Just a few days. After the demo, I have some vacation days saved up. 5 years worth. Actually, I'd never taken a real break. Too afraid something would fall apart without me. Harper. She paused, choosing her words carefully. The system needs you, especially during the demo. Ethan says he has everything under control. I'm sure it'll be fine. Something in my tone must have warned her. She studied my face, looking for signs of rebellion sabotage. But all she found was the same pleasant mask I'd worn for 5 years. That afternoon, Ethan brought in someone new, Tyler Morrison, fresh out of boot camp, eager and incompetent in equal measure. Harper, meet Tyler. He'll be shadowing you for the next few weeks. I want him fully up to speed on all our systems. Our systems? The possessive pronoun was a knife twist every time. Of course, I said, shaking Tyler's hand. Welcome to the team. Tyler was everything Ethan wanted: young, male, and stupid enough to believe Ethan's version of history. He took notes while I explained our infrastructure, asking questions that revealed he understood maybe half of what I was saying. This is incredible, he said after I'd walked him through the authentication system. Ethan must be a genius to design all this. He's something special, I agreed, my smile never wavering. I trained Tyler with meticulous care. Every procedure, every command, every surface-level understanding he needed to look competent for about 5 minutes. I gave him the keys to the kingdom, or at least, keys that looked right until you tried to use them under pressure. You're being very thorough, Ethan noted, watching me work with Tyler. I appreciate you being a team player. Just want to ensure continuity, I replied, in case anything happens. Nothing's going to happen, but I appreciate your diligence. Actually, I wanted to talk to you about your role post-demo. Here it comes. I thought, we're restructuring the engineering team, going to bring in some fresh perspectives, modernize our approach. I'll need you to focus on maintenance and support. Keep things running while we innovate. Maintenance and support, the janitorial work of engineering. Keep the lights on while other people built the future with blueprints I'd drawn. That sounds appropriate, I said. He blinked, probably expecting resistance. Really, I thought you might be disappointed. Why would I be disappointed? Everyone has their role to play. That night, I drafted my resignation letter. Simple, professional, effective immediately after the demo. I scheduled it to send at 10 a.m. on demo day, right when they'd be too busy to notice. I also made one final adjustment to my archived staging environment, a small change to the token expiration, moving it from midnight to 10:02 a.m. The tokens would expire naturally, as designed, as documented in the security protocols I'd written and Ethan had signed off on without reading. Everything was legal. Everything was by the book. Everything was exactly what they'd asked for. The last Thursday before the demo, Richard called an all-hands meeting. I want to thank everyone for their hard work preparing for Valor Cap. This deal will transform Redcrest. And I especially want to recognize Ethan, whose technical leadership has elevated us to new heights. The room applauded. I clapped too, my hands meeting in perfect rhythm while my mind was already 3,000 miles away. After the meeting, I found Marcus in the break room. "You okay?" he asked. "You've been different lately." "Different how?" "Quieter, more, I don't know, settled." "Settled, like sediment at the bottom of a lake, waiting." "I'm fine," I said. "Just ready for all this to be over." "The demo." "Everything." He looked at me sharply. "Harper." "I'm taking some vacation after the demo. Might travel. See some mountains." "Mountains," he repeated slowly. "Portland, maybe. I hear it's beautiful this time of year." Marcus was quiet for a moment. Then, "You deserve a vacation. You've more than earned it." That evening, I cleaned out my desk, not obviously just removing personal items one at a time, a photo here, a coffee mug there. By Friday afternoon, my workspace was as impersonal as a hotel room. I left one thing behind, a small succulent I'd kept alive for 3 years. I put it on Tyler's desk with a note. "Water once a week, don't overdo it, sometimes less is more." He wouldn't understand the metaphor, neither would Ethan. But in a week's time, when everything went dark at 10:02 in the morning, when $41 million evaporated into confused silence, they'd understand that sometimes the person you ignore is the only one keeping you alive. And by then, I'd be gone. Not fired, not pushed out, not erased. Just gone, like I'd never existed at all. Exactly the way they'd treated me for 5 years. Demo day arrived wrapped in Seattle's typical morning gray, but inside Redcrest Technologies, the atmosphere crackled with electric anticipation. I arrived at 7 a.m., 2 hours earlier than usual, carrying a box of artisan donuts from the expensive place downtown, the ones with gold leaf and exotic flavors that cost $8 each. I arranged them carefully in the break room, each one placed with the precision I'd once reserved for code architecture. In the center, I propped up a handwritten note on company stationery. "Happy Demo Day. Break a leg, team." The smiley face was a nice touch. Personal but not too personal. Memorable but not suspicious. "Harper. You're here early." Sandra found me in the break room, her stress evident in the 3 empty coffee cups she was already juggling. "Wanted to make sure everything was perfect for the big day," I said, adjusting the donut display one final time. "Ethan must be excited." "Excited is one word for it. He's been here since 5, running through his presentation. 5 a.m., 2 hours of practicing my work, memorizing my innovations, rehearsing my brilliance as his own. The poetry of it wasn't lost on me." "I should check if he needs anything," I offered. "Actually, he specifically asked not to be disturbed. He's in the main conference room with Richard, doing final preparations." Of course, even on demo day, I wasn't welcome in the room where my work would be presented. I returned to my desk and opened my laptop. The resignation email sat in my drafts, scheduled to send at 10 a.m. sharp, 2 minutes before everything would change. I reviewed it one more time. Effective immediately, I am resigning from my position at Redcrest Technologies. My access credentials have been deactivated and all documentation has been updated. Thank you for the opportunities. Harper Lane. Short, professional, final. At 9:30 a.m., the ValorCap team arrived, 3 partners, 2 analysts, and enough combined net worth to buy small countries. I watched from my desk as Richard greeted them with aggressive handshakes and practiced laughter. Ethan stood beside him, wearing a suit that probably cost more than my monthly salary, his confidence radiating like heat from a forge. Through the glass walls of the conference room, I could see them settling in. The massive display showed my architecture diagrams, my code structures, my innovations all branded with Ethan's name and the Redcrest logo. Tyler appeared at my desk, practically vibrating with excitement. "This is huge," Ethan said. "If this goes well, we're all getting bonuses." "That's wonderful," I said, pulling my personal laptop from my bag. "Hey, could you do me a favor? I need someone to monitor the production servers during the demo, just in case." Can you handle that? His chest puffed with pride. Absolutely, Ethan taught me everything about the system. Ethan taught him. The farce was so complete. Even the lies had become truth in their minds. Perfect. I'll be on standby if you need anything. I walked to the bathroom, locked myself in a stall, and opened my personal laptop. My AWS dashboard showed everything green. The staging environment was healthy. Tokens valid for exactly 22 more minutes. I closed the laptop and returned to my desk. 9:55 Through the conference room glass, I watched Ethan begin his presentation. His gestures were grand, theatrical, selling my soul with PowerPoint transitions and corporate buzzwords. The ValorCap partners leaned forward, interested, engaged. 9:58 Richard was beaming, that particular smile of a father watching his son succeed with stolen valor. Sandra sat rigid, knowing the truth, but trapped by corporate hierarchy. 10 a.m. My resignation email sent, the notification popped up on my phone. Message delivered. 10:01 Ethan clicked his presenter remote, advancing to the live demo portion. Now, let me show you the power of what we've built here at Redcrest. 10:02 He clicked again. Nothing happened. From my desk, I could see the exact moment his confidence cracked, the slight furrow of his brow, the quick double click of the remote, the glance at his laptop screen. Just a moment, he said, his voice carrying through the door someone had left cracked open. Minor technical glitch? Sandra was already on her laptop, fingers flying across the keyboard. I watched her face change as she discovered what I already knew: the entire staging environment was gone. Not deleted, not crashed, just archived, moved to cold storage as per the security protocol's automatic token expiration. Tyler appeared at my desk, face flushed with panic. Harper, the staging environment, it's not responding. Have you checked the tokens? I asked calmly, already packing my personal belongings into my bag. Tokens. Tokens? What tokens? The security tokens. They expire every 30 days. It's in the documentation Ethan gave you. His face went white. He didn't mention any tokens. Check section 47 of the security manual, the one Ethan wrote. The one Ethan had never read, despite his name being on it. Tyler sprinted back to his desk, frantically searching for documentation that would only tell him what had happened, not how to fix it, not in time. Through the glass, I watched Ethan's kingdom crumble in real time. Richard's face had gone from proud to purple. The ValorCap partners sat back in their chairs, their interest curdling into judgment. Sandra was on her phone, probably calling the infrastructure team, but I knew what they'd find: everything working exactly as designed, exactly as documented, exactly as Ethan had approved without understanding. I stood, picked up my bag, and walked toward the exit. As I passed the conference room, I heard Richard's voice, no longer boardroom smooth. Ethan, what the hell is happening? There must be a bug. Harper, where's Harper? But I was already at the elevator, my reflection in the polished doors showing a woman at perfect peace. 5 years of being invisible had taught me how to disappear completely. The elevator arrived with a soft chime. As the doors closed, I caught one last glimpse of the chaos: Ethan frantically typing, Richard shouting, Sandra explaining something with her hands, the ValorCap team standing to leave. $41 million, evaporating in the morning air. The elevator descended, and I smiled, not the practice smile I'd worn for 5 years, but something real, something mine. By the time I reached the parking garage, my phone was buzzing with calls and messages. I turned it off without looking. There was nothing they could say that would matter now. I had a flight to catch. Portland was waiting, and I'd heard the coffee there was exceptional. Behind me, on the 7th floor, an empire built on my stolen work was learning what happens when you forget the name of your foundation. It collapses. The conference room had become a war zone of blame and technical incompetence. Through the glass walls, ValorCap's partners watched the meltdown with the detached fascination of watching a car crash in slow motion, horrifying but impossible to look away from. Pull up the backup environment. Richard's voice cracked with desperation. His CEO composure shattered like expensive crystal on marble floors. Sandra's fingers flew across her keyboard, her face increasingly grim. There is no backup environment. The staging server was the backup. Harper always managed redundancy through... Then where the hell is Harper? Richard spun around, searching the office floor through the glass walls. Her desk is empty, Tyler stammered from the doorway. His boot camp confidence evaporated. Her computer's gone. There's just... this plant. Ethan was still clicking frantically at his laptop, sweat beading on his forehead, destroying the careful styling of his $100 haircut. This has to be sabotage. She did something. Check the logs. Sandra pulled up the system logs on the main display. Her voice clinical as she read, Token expiration at 10:02 a.m., automatic archival to cold storage as per security protocol section 47.3, approved by... She paused, and I could imagine the satisfaction in that silence. Approved by Ethan Vaughn, 3 weeks ago. I never approved that. Your digital signature is right here. Sandra highlighted the timestamp. You signed off on the entire security documentation update. The ValorCap lead partner, a woman named Catherine Walsh, who'd built her reputation on seeing through corporate bullshit, finally spoke, Mr. Vaughn, are you telling us you approved security protocols for your own system without reading them? It's not my... Ethan started, then stopped, trapped by his own lies. He couldn't admit it wasn't his system without admitting to months of fraud. Can't you just restore it? Richard demanded. Sandra shook her head. Cold storage retrieval takes 3 to 4 hours minimum. The data has to be rehydrated, configurations rebuilt, connections reestablished, and that's assuming we have someone who knows the proper sequence. Tyler knows the system, Ethan said desperately. I trained him myself. All eyes turned to Tyler, who looked like he might vomit on the conference room's expensive carpet. I know how to run basic commands. Harper showed me the maintenance procedures. But then follow the procedures. Tyler opened his laptop with shaking hands, pulling up the documentation I'd left him. Even from memory, I could see the pages of technically accurate, functionally useless instructions, like trying to perform brain surgery with an anatomy textbook, but no medical training. Step 1, Tyler read. Access the primary authentication portal using your senior administrative credentials. He looked up. I don't have senior administrative credentials. Use Harper's, Richard barked. Her resignation email says she deactivated her access, Sandra said, pulling up the message on the screen. The timestamp glowed 10 a.m. exactly. She followed security protocol perfectly. No active credentials remain in the system after employee separation. Catherine Walsh stood up, her movement commanding the room's attention. Gentlemen, Ms. Kim, I think we've seen enough. Please, Richard's voice cracked. This is a minor technical glitch. If you could just give us an hour. An hour. Catherine's laugh was sharp as winter wind. Mr. Vaughn, you just demonstrated that your technical leadership doesn't understand their own security protocols, can't access their own systems, and more importantly, tried to pass off work they clearly didn't create as their own. That's not... I've been in venture capital for 20 years. I know when I'm being sold smoke and mirrors versus substance. What I just witnessed wasn't a technical glitch. It was a competence crisis. She turned to her team. We're done here. The system works perfectly. Ethan's desperation pitched his voice an octave higher. Harper can fix this. Get her back here. Catherine paused at the door. Harper, that's the engineer who actually built this. Isn't it? The one whose name isn't on any of your presentations but whose work you've been claiming. The silence that followed was deafening. We do our due diligence, Mr. Vaughn, Catherine continued. We pulled your commit logs last week. Interesting reading. Harper Lane, 8,300 commits over 5 years. Ethan Vaughn, 17 commits. Mostly to README files. She looked at Richard. You want some free advice? Next time you try to sell stolen talent, Make sure you haven't driven away the actual talent first." The ValorCap team filed out, their footsteps echoing down the hallway like a funeral march. Through the glass, the entire office watched the $41 million deal walk out the door. "Fix this," Richard told Sandra, his voice low and dangerous. "Whatever it takes." "I can't fix what I don't fully understand," Sandra replied. "Harper built this system. She optimized it. She maintained it. Without her, we're looking at days, maybe weeks, to fully understand and restore everything." "She planned this," Ethan said, his face blotchy with rage and humiliation. "This is corporate sabotage. We should sue her." Sandra laughed, actually laughed. "Sue her for what?" "Following documented procedures. Resigning via email, having her security tokens expire on schedule. Everything that happened was by the book. Your book, Ethan, the one with your name on it." "There has to be something." "There is," Sandra said, standing up. "It's called consequences. You wanted the credit for Harper's work. Congratulations. You also get the responsibility for not understanding it." She headed for the door. "Where are you going?" Richard demanded. "To update my resume, I suggest you start looking for a new CTO along with a new lead engineer. Maybe this time, promote people based on merit instead of DNA." The door closed behind her with a soft click that sounded like finality. Through all of this, Tyler stood frozen in the corner, still clutching his laptop like a life preserver, the documentation on his screen a testament to my final gift instructions that were perfectly correct and completely useless without the years of context I'd taken with me. "Can you fix it or not?" Richard asked him. Tyler looked at the documentation, at the error messages, at the archived environment he couldn't reach, and finally at the plant on his desk, the only thing I'd left behind. "I don't even know where to start," he admitted. Neither did they. That was the point. The empire hadn't just crumbled. It had revealed itself to be built on nothing but stolen blueprints and borrowed brilliance. And the architect they'd erased had taken the foundation with her when she left. Within 3 hours of the ValorCap disaster, Redcrest Technologies transformed from a rising star to a cautionary tale. The tech world is small, and bad news travels at fiber optic speed. By 1 p.m., TechCrunch had picked up the story. Redcrest loses 41 million. Deal in live demo disaster. The article was surprisingly well-sourced. Someone inside had talked. Multiple someones, apparently. Sandra's resignation became official at 2:15 p.m., delivered in person to Richard's office with half the company watching through the glass walls. She didn't bother lowering her voice when she told him exactly what she thought of his leadership. The phrase nepotistic incompetence carried clearly across the open floor plan. The development team began their exodus shortly after. Marcus was first, sending his resignation from his phone while still at his desk. "I refuse to work for people who steal credit and destroy careers," he wrote in the company's Slack before his access was revoked. The message stayed up just long enough for screenshots to circulate. By 3 p.m., the senior developers were gone. The mid-level engineers followed. Even the junior developers' kids fresh out of college who needed their jobs started updating their LinkedIn profiles right there in the office, not bothering to hide their screens. Richard called an emergency all-hands at 4 p.m. The conference room was half empty. "We're experiencing some temporary disruptions," he began, his voice trying for authority but achieving only desperation. "But Redcrest has weathered storms before." "What storms?" someone called out from the back. "Harper handled all the storms. She was the one who fixed everything while Ethan took credit." Richard's face darkened. "That's enough. Anyone who doesn't want to be part of our recovery can leave now." 12 more people stood up and walked out. Just left. Right in the middle of his speech. The sound of their footsteps was thunderous in the silence. Ethan hadn't been seen since the demo. Rumor was he'd locked himself in his office, trying desperately to understand the system he'd claimed to have built. The help desk tickets piled up. Customer complaints flooded in. The production servers, stable for now, ran on automation and prayers but without maintenance, without updates, without Harper's constant invisible adjustments. They were living on borrowed time. At 5:30 p.m., the board called an emergency meeting. Through the executive conference room glass, employees watched Richard being eviscerated by angry investors. His gestures grew increasingly frantic, his usual smooth talking replaced by stammering justifications. The building's property manager arrived at 6 p.m. with an uncomfortable message. 3 other companies in the building had already inquired about Redcrest's lease, having heard the company might not survive the month. The cleaning crew found Ethan still in his office at 9 p.m., surrounded by printed documentation, energy drink cans, and the stench of failure. He was on page 200 of my security protocols, trying to understand token rotation. He had 600 pages to go. The next morning's damage assessment was brutal. 18 resignation letters overnight. 2 major clients pulled their contracts, citing concerns about technical leadership and platform stability. The third-party contractors refused to continue without guaranteed payment. Upfront word had spread that Redcrest might not make payroll. The production servers started showing stress. Small errors at first delayed responses, timeout warnings. Without the daily optimizations I'd performed every morning for 5 years, the technical debt was compounding hourly. Ethan tried to hire emergency consultants, but the quotes were astronomical. "You want us to reverse engineer an undocumented system built by someone else?" one firm responded. "That's a 6-month project minimum, and we'll need a $2 million retainer." The ValorCap news had triggered a cascade. 3 other pending investment rounds were postponed indefinitely. The bank called about the business credit line. The landlord wanted to discuss the lease terms. Richard made a desperate play. He offered Sandra double her salary to come back. Her response, posted publicly on LinkedIn: "Some bridges aren't worth rebuilding, especially when they were constructed on the backs of unrecognized talent." By Thursday, 3 days after the demo, Redcrest's Glassdoor page had 27 new reviews. They painted a picture of a toxic culture where nepotism trumped merit and talent was exploited until it walked away. My name appeared in 15 of them. Variations of the same theme. Harper was the only reason anything worked. The board called another meeting. This time, Richard wasn't invited. Ethan was formally removed from his position pending restructuring. The polite corporate language couldn't hide the reality. He was done. Tyler, the boot camp graduate who'd been meant to replace me, lasted exactly 4 days. His resignation was brief. "I was hired to do a job that requires 5 years of experience I don't have. This is impossible." He left the succulent on his desk. Apparently, he'd overwatered it. It was dying. The forensic accountants arrived Friday morning. When a company bleeds $41 million in valuation in a week, people start asking hard questions about finances. They commandeered the conference room, the same one where Ethan had presented my work as his own. The GitHub repository told its own story. 8,300 commits from H-Lane at Redcrest.com, 17 from Yvonne at Redcrest.com. The accountants weren't technical, but they could do math. They could see the timestamp patterns my commits at all hours, solving critical issues, building features, fixing breaks. Ethan's commits during business hours only, usually just documentation updates or config file adjustments. "Who is Harper Lane?" the lead accountant asked. "She was an engineer," Richard replied, the past tense hanging in the air like an accusation. Where is she now?" "She resigned Monday morning." The accountant looked at the commit history, then at the timeline of the company's collapse, then back at Richard. "You let the person who built your entire platform walk away." Richard's silence was its own confession. The final numbers were brutal: $41 million in lost investment, $8 million in pending client refunds for SLA violations, $2 million in emergency consulting fees that might not even work, and a reputation so destroyed that the company name had become a verb in local tech circles. "Don't pull a Redcrest" meant don't let nepotism destroy your company. The board's final decision came down Saturday afternoon. Redcrest Technologies would be dissolved. The assets would be sold. The technology, my technology, would be licensed to competitors for pennies on the dollar, assuming anyone could figure out how to run it. Richard Vaughn was removed as CEO effective immediately. His golden parachute was revoked due to gross mismanagement and failure of fiduciary duty. Ethan Vaughn was marked as ineligible for rehire in every HR system that mattered. His brief tenure as VP of Engineering Innovation became a scarlet letter in Silicon Valley's unforgiving memory. The empire hadn't just fallen, it had been erased, as thoroughly as they'd tried to erase me. But unlike me, it wouldn't be coming back. Portland morning coffee tastes different when it's flavored with vindication. At 10:02 a.m., exactly 1 week after the demo that destroyed Redcrest Technologies, I sat on a small balcony overlooking the Willamette River. My laptop closed. My phone finally turned back on. The messages had stopped flooding in after day 3. First the panic. Harper, urgent. Call immediately. Then the bargaining. Whatever you want. Name your price. Then the anger. You destroyed us. Legal action will follow. Finally, silence. The beautiful, complete silence of consequences fully realized. My phone buzzed once. A LinkedIn notification. Marcus had tagged me in a post. Starting my new role at CloudForge today. Grateful for the mentors who showed me what real engineering looks like. You know who you are. I smiled and closed the notification. There would be no public victory lap. No told-you-so posts. No theatrical reveals. The best revenge doesn't need an audience. It only needs to be complete. The news of Redcrest's dissolution had made the tech blogs. From 41 million valuation to bankruptcy in 1 week, a cautionary tale of what happens when you lose your real talent. They'd even found an old photo from a company party me in the background, slightly out of focus, working on my laptop while everyone else celebrated. The metaphor was almost too perfect. My AWS dashboard showed my personal infrastructure humming along perfectly. The parallel system I'd built, the one that proved I could recreate everything they'd stolen from me, I archived it all. Encrypted, stored. A museum piece of what I was capable of when properly motivated. Evidence I'd never need to use because the truth had spoken for itself. The succulent had died. Tyler had sent me a message on LinkedIn with a photo of it. Withered and brown. I'm sorry, he'd written. I didn't know what I was getting into. You tried to warn me with this plant, didn't you? Sometimes less is more. Sometimes it is. The Portland tech scene was already courting me. 3 offers on the table, each one starting at double what Redcrest had paid me. But I wasn't ready yet. For the first time in 5 years, I was taking a real break, learning what morning felt like when it wasn't preceded by 3 emergency calls, discovering what weekends meant when they weren't spent patching systems and covering for incompetence. Catherine Walsh from Valor Cap had reached out personally, not with a job offer, but with something better, an apology. We should have done better due diligence on the real talent, she wrote. When you're ready, I have a portfolio of companies that could benefit from someone who actually builds instead of just taking credit. When I was ready, not if, when. At exactly 10:02 a.m., I opened my laptop and pulled up a blank document. Not code this time, a book proposal. The Invisible Engineer, a Silicon Valley ghost story. The first chapter would be about the myth of meritocracy. The last would be about the power of walking away. Richard Vaughn was reportedly selling his house. Ethan had moved back in with his parents. His LinkedIn profile scrubbed of any mention of Redcrest. The office space had already been leased to a new startup, one that promised to value technical talent above all else. We'd see how long that lasted. Sandra had landed at Microsoft. She'd sent me a single text. They asked about you in my interview. Your legend is already spreading. The engineer who destroyed a company by following the rules. Not destroyed, revealed. I'd simply stopped holding up something that was always meant to fall. The coffee shop below my apartment was playing jazz, something smooth and victorious. The barista had started recognizing me, calling me by name, asking about my day. Small human connections that I'd missed during years of being invisible at a company that consumed everything and acknowledged nothing. My phone buzzed again. Another recruiter, another opportunity, another company promising they were different and valued their engineers. Maybe some of them were telling the truth. Maybe the story of Redcrest would serve as a warning. Maybe other Harper Lanes wouldn't have to disappear to be seen. Or maybe not. The tech world has a short memory and a long history of repeating its mistakes. But that wasn't my problem anymore. I closed my laptop and watched the river flow beneath the bridge. Somewhere in Seattle, the servers I'd built were probably failing, one error at a time. The documentation I'd left was being parsed by consultants who charged $500 an hour to understand work I'd done for a fraction of that. The empire of stolen credit was being auctioned off piece by piece. And I was here, drinking excellent coffee, planning my next chapter, visible at last in my complete absence. They'd wanted me to disappear, so I did. I just took everything with me when I left. The real power isn't in being seen. It's in knowing exactly when to become invisible, and what to take with you when you go. They'd erased my name from their presentations, their org charts, their future. So I removed myself from their lives in the present. $41 million. 5 years of stolen credit. One perfectly timed resignation. And at 10:02 a.m. on a beautiful Portland morning, not a single regret. Thank you for listening to this story of justice served cold in the corporate world. I'd love to know where you're listening from. Drop a comment, and let's connect. If this tale of revenge resonated with you, please subscribe to the channel and share your own thoughts about workplace justice. Have you ever witnessed karma catching up with those who steal credit? Let me know in the comments below.